That's interesting, Emma, because I think he's way scarier now too. And so I wonder if there is something to that. Because if you had asked me who my favorite villain was 2 months ago, I probably would have said Raboniel or someone. He's way scarier to me now, and I do wonder if it's because real life is blending with fiction.
It's not safe here anymore. Hi, ghouls, gals, and spooky pals. Welcome back to the Monstration Club. I'm here with my best friends,
Matthew.
And Jen,
and today we're going to be talking about the nightmare fuel from the Stormlight Archive series. So there will be spoilers from all four books because we have read all four books. Some of us have read them more than once, and by some of us, I mean Matt. The others of us have read them once. They're super big books. But the final book, Wind and Truth, comes out really soon. So we're going to be talking about things from the previous four books. And in typical Monstration Club fantasy, we're going to be talking about the spookier parts of it. So to get started, we're getting ready for the fifth book, and I want to hear kind of your general thoughts about how you feel about this character when you hear their name mixed with Wind and Truth. And first up is Taravangian.
terrified, completely terrified of what's
For
going to
him or for
occur.
humanity?
For humanity, Emma.
Duh.
No, he'll be fine or he won't. He's crazy and he probably won't know the difference. So, no, I'm
He
scared
is
for
the nightmare
humanity.
fuel.
Yes. He
Yeah,
is the nightmare fuel.
I think, and we've been going back and forth if you watch previous episodes about who's crazier or who isn't. I think the thing that is terrifying about him for me is that I don't think he's crazy. I think he's incredibly logical and exacting and specific in what he does. And that's actually like scarier because he's so
Hmm.
effective.
Okay,
Hmm.
Matt, but this is so we were talking about this earlier, and you mentioned he almost has like this religious fervor, and that's what makes him like a sane person. And I would argue this does not make him a sane person. So I do think he is still, I know we don't like the word crazy. I think he's wackadoodle. Um, and just because he's like super logical and he like has his motivations, he also has like he's not always super pragmatic. Some days he's like stupid. And that makes him scary to me and kind of like he's so unpredictable, Matt. Maybe he isn't crazy. Maybe my point is I don't think having religious fervor makes him immune to getting that label.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe more
Well,
likely to get it.
yeah, I mean he's I guess he's in my mind he's logical. I just think he's wrong. Like I disagree with
Hmm.
him,
Okay.
but I think he gets there in a straight line. And because he is so sure of how right he is, and that he's so sure that the ends justify the means, not that I necessarily know what he's going to do at all times, but to me, there is a certain predictability in that. Like he is going to do whatever he thinks is best, regardless of who dies along the way, and like that level of like conviction and self-righteousness like is actually more terrifying to me than like someone who's out of control and like stalking through the woods trying to kill you. Like that feels like avoidable, like I'm not going into the woods or like I can outsmart or get away from this person. But the one that is like slowly and exacting, in not like in a passionate rage but just in a really clinical logical
Psychopathic.
way accomplishes it.
Psychopathic,
Psychopathic.
one might say.
Ugh.
One might
Psychopathic.
say.
Yeah.
I do think Taravangian is unpredictable to me. I think I do think he's crazy, but I think it's because, like you said, Matt, he does what he thinks is right, but I also think what he thinks is right changes in ways that he views as being logical that other people don't view as being logical, I think. So I think he has like a goal in sight, which is to save his people. Um, but I think the thing that scares me about him is that um, he's unpredictable, and what he views as right can be so off the wall bizarre. Like he is, but I agree with you that what he views as right is always his guidepost. Like his guidepost is always help the most people or help his people. But I think the thing that scares me about him is that like what he thinks is right can change. Like he's like murdering all of these princes and people. And then later he's like, maybe I didn't have to do that. Okay. And I'm like, what? Like everyone is dead because of you, and maybe you just didn't have to do that? What? This is wackadoodle.
Yeah.
Um,
And even then, it's not that he feels bad about it. It's
Yeah.
that
yes.
he
Hmm.
is unsure if it was necessary.
Hmm.
Psychopathic.
Yes.
Like,
Yes, it
yeah,
is.
it's why Patrick Bateman is like so much like literally from Psycho is so much more
Hmm.
terrifying to me than like the werewolf in the woods.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think we're all afraid of him. He is nightmare fuel for sure. What about Zeth?
Kind of just sad for him, honestly. Like
Yeah.
he's also barely holding on, and I think he's gonna just snap and like go to town at some point.
Yeah.
Mm.
But
Dalinar scale genocide.
it maybe from against those who he perceives as having wronged him.
Mhm.
So I think that to me, if we want to talk about unpredictability, I think it's Zeth's entire MO.
Mhm.
And we saw right at the end of um, Rhythm of War just now, like he went to Taravangian's house to murder him and believes he did the deed.
Mhm.
Like he
Yeah.
crossed the line to like, I am going to be judge, jury, and executioner right now and execute this
Mhm.
person. And so like he has already crossed into that and now he's committed himself to quote unquote cleansing, also that choice of words, um,
Yeah.
his home country. So like his martial effectiveness, like we know that he is incredibly dangerous and now he has like
Mhm.
the will and giving himself the permission to unleash that. Yeah, he's his level of, and he is also like just straight up broken. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
pretty wackadoodle crazy and like broken.
Hmm. Yeah, and he doesn't really care about like getting it back together so much. Like that's not any of his
It's not a
motivation.
priority.
I mean,
He's
literally,
not
like
going to
his soul
therapy
isn't
once a
even
week.
attached to his body anymore. He's that not together.
This is pretty bad. Yeah, that's not an ideal way to function in Rosharian life. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Zeth, Jen?
No, I'm scared of what he's going to do. I guess I'm not scared of what he's going to do. I'm really interested in what he's going to do the more unhinged he becomes. But I don't have any predictions in terms of survival rate. He'll probably be fine because he seems like such a badass, to be honest. I don't know what's gonna bring him down.
Like the cockroaches. Like he's just isn't gonna
He's not
he's
going
not like
anywhere.
a cockroach in his personality, but in his ability to survive. Uh, yeah, that's interesting though, because I think that he is very unpredictable, right? But I'm also not attached to the Shin people as a people because we haven't been
Yeah.
introduced to that. So I am more interested and less scared versus like Taravangian, I am now invested in the people. So he scares me more, which is just interesting.
Yeah.
What about
I agree with
Venli?
that. Hopeful. Oh gosh, Matt.
Oh,
Oh my
Jen,
God.
hopeful.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful she's gonna have her true redemption arc. We all agree she sucks. She sucks, but I do think she's coming around.
I think the one reason, the other thing that, among many other, I suppose, that bugs me about Venli is I'm actually really interested in the listeners. Like, we're
Hmm.
only gonna get stories about the listeners, like we saw at the very end, like through Venli's perspective. And like they're so fascinating to me. Like bring Esh and I back so that we can get a different perspective on, or maybe like Relaine can be over there, or we can get
Well,
Thu's
it would
perspectives.
be
I
better.
just I really want to know what's going on with the singers. Literally, Venli brought like hundreds of um whatever type of spren she has, right, that are willing to bond
Hmm.
singers. So like they're gonna have hundreds of radiants available to them, and apparently they've befriended chasmfiends. So
Hmm.
and like they were out there surviving and they're doing their own thing, and they're like this third party that just wants to be left alone, which to me is like very Hufflepuff, so I'm into it. Like just we're gonna camp out by the kitchens, don't mind us, everybody stay away. Like I am here for that. But I don't want to do it through Venli. Come on.
That's such a good point, Matt. Because I
Yeah.
do really like the singers and I do want to learn about them, but I would rather her die and Relaine come to the singers and hear it through his perspective.
Maybe that's what I'm responding to more than even liking Venli is when when we're reading about her, it's about the singers. I hadn't thought of like a different narrator for I mean, obviously I miss Esh and I hadn't even thought of Verlaine as being able to convey that information. But I do think sometimes Esh and I is just the more relatable and better character to read about the
Hmm.
singers through. But I like Bentley. I like Bentley.
Like it's
You're such a
so
little feminist, Jen. You're like all like these complicated female characters were like they suck. And you're like, but there's hope and they're good. And like
I'm just
I really
naive.
appreciate you. I really appreciate your like optimism in people. Um,
For
so yeah.
Parshendi.
yeah, because we've had so many interesting perspectives from Venli. Like we get to learn about like the like bondable spren through her. We get to learn about like I think Leshwi is fascinating. Like I
I love
want
Leshri.
POV and but all we get to learn about her is through Venli,
Hmm.
Hmm.
right? And now like Leshwi is in full rebellion. Oh man, that's who we need. Like if we could just switch narrators to Leshwi because she's with the singers now,
Hmm.
like that would do it for me.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that. I think, like you said, Matt, you said this on Wednesday. Venley's constantly failing up. Like every time she does something bad, like somehow things get better for her. And so I think that's maybe why I feel like the only way she can be redeemed is if she dies. Like I just feel like that's the only way she can really redeem. But I have seen bigger turnarounds. Like look at Jamie in Game of Thrones. My mom told me he was her favorite character when I started reading. I came out 2 chapters later and was like, he is having sex with his sister and just tried to murder a child. Like he is your favorite what? And he had a big turnaround. So like if Jamie can do it, maybe Venley can do it too.
Yeah, I mean, she just got a long way to go. Like, I think the
Mhm.
biggest thing is everything she's done has been selfish. Like, literally
Mhm.
everything she's done, including like saving a caged child, she only did after she learned that she wasn't going to be able to advance as a radiant unless she helped free everyone. Therefore, she had to help free Lift. Like, even that was like, oh, well, now that it's an impediment to me, like, I'll do this good thing.
Mhm.
And then it was like, oh, well, like, I'll help wake the Radiants because it'll be a good distraction for me to go try to find my mom, who I was gonna murder and then didn't get the chance to. And they're like, hey, maybe you shouldn't, like, Relane's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't find them because, like, it could lead, like, they're currently isolationist and, like, it could lead the fused to them. And she's like, no, I just need to see her for my own, even though it's going to jeopardize her and our entire people. For my good, I need to go find them. Like,
Yeah.
literally everything she's done has been selfish.
That's who she
And
is.
she's
That's
not a
who
thing to
she
succeed.
It's
is.
a, I love that acceptance, Jen. That's who she is. That's okay.
I accept her as a
Yeah,
character. I don't want to be her friend, obviously. But I accept her as a character. I think she's interesting.
she is interesting. She is interesting. Okay, last one. Wit. Or what is his formal name?
Boyd,
Defendrius.
right? Oh,
Nefandrius. Yeah, or Hoyt. I think both. He goes by both, but
yeah.
I think his like um fancy name. His
His,
scientific name is
his first
Nefandrius.
name, his birth name
Um,
is
his birth
Sophandrius.
name, Nefandrius. What do y'all think about Wit?
He'll be fine. Just go to a different planet, right? And jet on away. Is that how that works, Matt? You just
I think so. I mean, he's kind of super immortal.
Yeah,
Like
just
he actually specifically at one point in this book tells Yasna like, well, no, just killing me hasn't worked yet. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean it won't ever work.
Mhm.
Uh,
So, Matt, has Wit in any of his other storylines ever been romantically connected with anyone, or just Yasna? That'd be
he's
interesting.
he's the most involved in this book. So like in Rhythm of War and then potentially going forward is like the most involved he's gotten. Everywhere else he shows up, he's just kind of like cruising through, checking out, seeing what's going on,
Mhm.
kind of on the periphery. This is the first time he's like stepped in to get involved, which is also why he's putting himself at risk because him being aloof is what's kept him safe. Like if he
hmm
doesn't
Mhm.
interfere with the gods, they can't interfere with him. The more involved he gets, the more involved they can get with him.
Yeah, I think he probably will survive this book. I also think it's possible that what he does in this book might lead to a grim future later on in the Cosmere. Like, I think his involvement here might have some larger implications
Yeah.
that he may not see yet.
I did love, okay, this is going to be a really big throwback, but Wit's whole shtick reminded me so much of the first Men in Black movie, if you remember that way back in the day. There's a part at the end where like the giant roach thing is trying to escape, and Tommy Lee Jones is like, whatever happens, keep him on this planet. And then he runs over and gets eaten by that giant roach. And it's like Will Smith's like last like order is like whatever happens, keep him here. Even if keeping him here means like the Earth gets blown up because he can't if he gets out, like it's gonna lead to much, much worse things.
Mhm.
And it just reminded for some reason I just every time Wit was like, whatever happens, keep Odium on Roshar. Like even
Mhm.
if he blows up Roshar, we can't let him blow everyone else up. So keep him
hmm
Mhm.
here no matter what.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, dang. Like, because he is doing that, like we talked about earlier, that
Mhm.
long view of the immortal,
Mhm.
right? That he's like,
Which
even
I
if the worst
mhm.
case scenario is he's rampaging around Roshar, he's at least not destroying every other planet out there.
Mhm. Which I think also like they view as being very self-interested, which in some ways I think it probably is. But I also don't think they realize like he could literally destroy an entire solar. Like I don't think they realize that it's not just self-interest. I don't think it's also that Wit is like there's like other places that need to not be destroyed by this guy, by this one person.
Yeah.
God, godlike figure. So we're going to talk a little bit about nightmare fuel, which is like if your nightmares are the car, nightmare fuel is like the gasoline that you pump in. Like what fuels your nightmares from Stormlight Archives. And so what's y'all's nightmare fuel if you had to pick one?
I know mine and Matt's are kind of related. Mine is the chasmfiends. I think they're really scary. They remind me a lot of the sandworms on Dune for a variety of reasons. Just their gigantic size, they're very alien. They're so like integral to like Roshar as a planet, which as a planet, I don't think I would ever want to be on Roshar. It really creeps me out. I don't like all the crustaceans and all the
There's like
crab-like
nothing good
beings.
about Roshar,
There's nothing good about
really.
Roshar. The Everstorms, the storm. No, it's
Axe
not a place
hounds,
Jen is
it's
ever
like
gonna live.
grasshoppers on a
Uh,
leash,
and they're
essentially.
connected to the high storms too. No, they're not for me. They are carnivorous. Um, and I don't know, they're dangerous. They're difficult to kill. Humans harvest them, which is a whole thing. The people get stuck in the chasms and there's nowhere for them to go except for to be eaten by these chasm fiends. Um, and this is something I think this is a nice transition for you, Matt. Like they emerge from these liminal spaces because I think the chasms are kind of a liminal space. We don't expect humans there necessarily, but I imagine them as these like eerie, huge, agoraphobic nightmare fuel for someone. They're just empty.
Okay, if
Yeah.
you don't know what liminal spaces are, like I didn't, we did a video on it recently.
Check out the
So
link.
pause, go watch that video, and then come back and hear Matt talk about chasms.
So yeah, I mean, I think, and this is where how I've got into related is like for me, like the chasms themselves are like a terrifying thing. I think I have a natural fear of like small enclosed spaces. Like just or of feeling trapped. And that's where like there are dangers. Like the chasm fiends are one of the reason why. Like I don't mind being in like a basement because I'm safe and cozy in there. But like if I'm in there with a giant predator, that makes it scarier. But there's something about I think like cave systems are kind of a classic like horror, scary, you're trapped, it's lightless. There's something even more like existentially terrifying about the fact that you can see daylight. Like there's theoretically a way out, except you're 50, 60, hundreds of feet down with these like slick moss covered walls that are like constantly smoothed out by giant floods. And so you actually aren't you might as well be in a cave. But they're like
It's
it's
like
like this
Eshonai, right? Like that's how Eshonai dies. Is she's like, I can make it up there. I can see it. And then she realizes there's no way she's leaving and the water comes. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think that's a good point, Matt, that you can see daylight. So it feels like you should be able to escape.
yeah. And it's like such a one-way trip. Like well, and like Eshonai is a good example. So like she falls in and the same thing happens to Kaladin Shallan, but to get out is like miles in another direction. Right? So you can access it anywhere, but you can't actually leave it
Hmm.
except for at very specific points or with assistance.
No,
And
you're toast. You're toast. You're not leaving. You're not leaving. Esh and I, if Esh and I can't leave, the three of us aren't going.
yeah.
We're not going to be able to get out.
Well, I mean, so much so that the listeners like went the survivors went down into the chasms and everyone was like, "Oh, okay, so they're all dead." Like just took it for
Yeah.
granted that like, "Oh, so they're dead." Like that's it. That's the only
Hmm.
the bridge crews were allowed down in the chasms because they're like, "Sure, go ahead, try to run, whatever." Like that's
Yeah.
how dangerous these spaces are. They're like confining, they're confusing, it's a maze, but they're like kind of open. Like, right?
Hmm.
Like you could run for almost like, for miles and miles and miles and never actually double back on yourself. And yet you're still trapped no matter how far you go. There's something about that. This is probably also mixed in with like my white cis male fears of like fearing powerlessness. I have noticed that as a theme for myself, and I think that's a lot to do with this. Um, but there's that idea of and they're just right there, and also they're full of like dead bodies, floods, and like unearthly
Chasmfiends.
large predators. No, thank you.
Yeah, I
Roshar is
think
a
that's
nightmare.
Roshar is a nightmare.
Just that's
Roshar
our
is a
nightmare
nightmare.
fuel, the planet of Roshar.
Roshar. Well,
The
that's
planet
what,
of
when you were
Roshar.
talking about, I was like, why didn't I just pick Roshar? That is nightmare fuel. Being stuck in Roshar is my nightmare.
Okay, so which is funny because whenever Wit tells stories and he talks about like cute animals, he's always like, "Oh yeah, you don't have cute things here. Let's like talk about something with a
Yeah.
shell that's awful." Um, have y'all ever seen The Descent?
No.
No.
Oh my God. The
But you
Descent
talk
is
about this movie a lot.
okay, it's like an amazing horror movie. If folks have seen it, let me know if you liked it. It's one of probably the best horror movies I've seen because it really plays on this. So it's about four women who go caving together and they're like underground in these caves. So it's different in that they can't see light necessarily, right? It's dark. But as they're down there, there's these like humanoid creatures that are also cannibals. And it's unclear, I believe. It's been a while since I've watched it. I can only watch it if I really want to be scared. Um, but there's these like humanoid creatures, and I think it's supposed to be ambiguous on purpose. Like you don't know if they were humans before or if they're like monsters. Like it's kind of unclear because they're very humanoid. Um, that just like start picking people off, and uh, you're like wandering, and then they'll come, and you kind of like hear them, right? See them, see the pieces of them. And that is the imagery that came to mind when y'all were talking about the chasms of like you're walking and all of a sudden you like hear something and you're like, what's going on? And you can't get away.
It's too
But
late
the
if you
chasms
hear
seem
it.
even worse because you can see daylight theoretically.
Yeah, and they actually use that to great effect a couple times in the series where they talk about like seeing the big scrapings on the wall and like how high up they're just like the casual bumping was, or
Mhm.
like they hear like the scratching against rock like a few chasms over and like freeze and like try to slowly
Hmm.
back up and get away. But yeah, it's something about that inevitability that chasm fiends bring in. Like
Hmm.
if they spot you, it's just over.
Game over. And I think it's especially disturbed, like walking through and just seeing dead bodies everywhere, right? Like that's not a great, it's not a great thing.
No.
Roshar is terrible.
So, initially I was thinking about the Unmade in the tower with Shallan, the kind of like shadow monster. But I think honestly, Taravangian. I don't even know how to say his
Taravangian.
name.
I know.
Taravangian. I think he is my nightmare fuel. Like just him as a human person is my nightmare fuel because he is so unpredictable. It's almost like he reminds me of a person who is about to take leadership over the US federal government, perhaps. And so maybe I'm having some existential crisis about that. Um, yeah,
Ooh.
I think I'm thinking that is actually why I am so scared of him now. Because I don't think he was my nightmare fuel 2 months ago, but now he is my nightmare
That's
fuel.
interesting, Emma, because I think he's way scarier now too. And so I wonder if there is something to that. Because if you had asked me who my favorite villain was 2 months ago, I probably would have said Raboniel or someone. He's way scarier to me now, and I do wonder if it's because real life is blending with fiction.
It's not safe here anymore. Yeah. Yeah, it's very concerning. And I think the like I'm doing this for the greater good, but really it's just whatever his whim is at the moment
Mhm.
is very scary to me. And the idea that like he will kill anyone or do anything if he thinks it's necessary. But his litmus test is just if I think it's the right thing, right? Like I think that's the thing that's hard is sometimes he might be right and sometimes he might be wrong, but his litmus test is only ever how he feels in the moment.
Yeah, nothing's off limits.
Nothing is off limits. Yeah, so he is my nightmare fuel for sure.
I think the one other piece I wanted to add in that is nightmare fuel for me on that more of that existential level like you're talking about is just the idea of being fused. This caught in this nightmare or kind of the same thing that the heralds run into of just this never-ending loop of they only get to exist in this state of conflict and war. Like literally being at peace means they're in hell, like they're on Braze, or the war starts up again and now they have to come fight it. Like that idea of that, yeah, that running that treadmill. We touched on this earlier, this idea of like slowly watching everyone you care about, like literally just break down, up to and including. I think that we have this incredibly tragic scene at the end of Rhythm of War with Raboniel. We find out her goal was just the first opportunity she has, she ends her own daughter's life and just sobs through the whole thing. But like her conviction is still, she still goes through with it and like then wants to check like did it actually work? Like this idea of like putting her down essentially, like this was a mercy killing and like that horror of being so trapped. Again, we're back to feeling powerlessness, of being so trapped and having so few decisions that all she wants to do is get out. And like that's her only focus is get out no matter what. Like what it would take for someone to get to that point to be so broken that she doesn't even care. Like she just wants out. Like that's how bad things have been for so long. Oh, that's a different kind of nightmare fuel.
I changed my answer to what you said. That's so it
Yeah.
reminds me actually when I was a kid, I grew up Christian. And so you learn like you're gonna be in heaven forever. And I remember like as a very young kid being like forever? Like forever ever? Like it's paradise, but when you get bored of it after what? Like forever ever? And that really that the idea of forever really scared me. It actually like put a pit in my stomach. I used to crawl in bed with my mom and be like, for like it just was really scary. And like a few years ago, Emily actually made reference to the fact that some people are afraid of that. Like I guess that is a fear. Like forever is a fear that some people have. I guess like you know how some people are afraid of holes. That's just mine, like honeycombs. Um, so the idea of forever is already really scary because even if something is good, it's just forever. Like this is a really long. I don't think people grasp how long that really is when we think of it as a good thing. And
It sounds like
then the
someone's still a
idea,
little scared of forever, maybe. I'm scared of forever.
perhaps,
There's no judgment here. I'm
perhaps.
I'm terrified, so
No, I am also scared still. I am still
yeah.
scared. Uh, but if you add on top of the idea of forever, that like on top of that, you just are slowly losing your sanity and watching the people around you lose their sanity and are in a constant state of war, that seems worse than regular forever.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
that's she dies happy. Like she literally is like, please kill me by the end,
Mm.
right? She
Mm.
just wants it to stop. Again, I
Mm.
still think that drove her, Fruity Loops Cocoa Puffs, and her obsession with that goal of, I get how
Yeah.
she got there. Like that's what's scary is that like you can get pushed so far that that's where you are. And
Yeah.
then wanting it just to end and not being able to affect it, right?
Hmm.
Being
Yeah.
so far down that pit for thousands of years and then being stuck. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, and as you were saying that, I'm thinking about like she just wants it to end and that idea. If you're wondering if she's crazy or not, watch our other video. Let us know what you think. I'm hard on this. She's not crazy. Matt thinks she's crazy. We want to hear if she's crazy or not. But I think this idea that like it not ending is worse, right? Like she's essentially like I would prefer us win, but this is worse. And
Yeah.
if if you are willing to see your entire essentially their version of humanity disappear, things have to be pretty bad for you to be like that is a better outcome than this continuing. So yeah, that's my
Parshmanity?
nightmare fuel. What was that?
Would there people be parshmanity? Is that a human word?
Parshmanity.
Freshmanity.
Any last thoughts about nightmare fuel? Are we gonna have nightmares? I feel like we should have done this earlier in the day. I'm
I
a
feel
little
like the
worried I'm
chasm
about to have
fiends
nightmares.
aren't gonna give me nightmares. I feel like none of this is gonna give me nightmares. So I guess no.
That's good.
Are you gonna have nightmares?
I think that's one of the reasons why I like this genre is because the threats are unreal, right?
Mhm.
Like yeah, we can have this idea of, the broad themes of powerlessness and the like, but like ultimately like no one is going to grant me with immortality and make me fight a war forever. Like that is not something that's actually threatening to me. There are not 50-foot tall crustaceans that are going to try to eat me while I'm in this maze canyon. So like they're like yeah, for me it just I can distance myself from it. I think it's why I have a tough time with like much more like real life grounded horror
Mhm.
because like yeah, people could do those things to me whereas like I don't have
Like
giant
misery.
crustaceans to contend with in real life.
Hmm. Yeah. As you were saying, that's not gonna happen. I was picturing like a planet on which, crustaceans and humans exist together, and they have their own version of red lobster that's human lobster, where they like pick us up and like pick out which human they want to eat.
Well, that could
So
give me nightmares, I think. But thinking about Roshar isn't gonna give me nightmares. But what you've described, thank you, Emma.
one of the next books I'm going to read, I'm super excited. It's by an Argentinian author called Tender is the Flesh. And I told Jen about it, but Matt, so it is kind of more like novella length, but it's about a world in which animal meat becomes poisonous to humans, so they have to begin eating human meat, and they call it like special meat. And then they are like people that raise the special meat, and yeah, I'm
And you read this voluntarily.
I'm gonna read it voluntarily. I am. I feel like it's gonna be a great commentary on the animal industry, and I might become a vegetarian after this.
She's going to read the first 20 pages, and if it's not super disturbing, I'm going to join her on this. But if it is disturbing, that's going to make me like eating animals less. I've told her I can't do it.
Oh,
So
I
we'll see.
support the eating animals less. I'll go for that part. Yeah, let's scare that out of you. Great. Join the
Let's
vegetarian
get
club.
that out of you.
It's happened to me so many times that like PETA has scared it out of me, and then there's ribs. So, and then I don't want to feel guilty about it because that's just the way I am, and it's the way I'm always going to be. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just next time you
Cognitive
pick that up, just
dissonance.
think about how similar they are to human ribs.
but
Yeah.
they're not, and they're not, and I won't.
Have we ever eaten human
How
ribs?
do you, yeah, have you
Should
had
that
special
be a
meat?
future
Yes, and
Monstration
I
Club
have.
episode?
Yes, I have.
I
Okay.
feel like there's somewhere in the world we could get our hands on some human ribs. I'm not endorsing cannibalism on this show. I want to be clear.
Yeah, I already don't like the fact that we're talking about cannibalism, or
We will
anything
never
to do
talk
with
about
this.
cannibalism again. I promise
Real
everyone.
world horror, though. Like,
Real
I
world horror.
am in this
Yeah.
cabin here with no one in any of the adjoining houses, and like the idea of the strangers is super terrifying to me. Not worried about a
Mhm.
giant crustacean crawling out of the water. Very worried about somebody coming to this house when we're isolated. Terrifying.
Yeah. Well, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You might now also be insane, along with Verbonial. But thank you for watching. And if you've made it this far, you should like and subscribe because it's totally free and we are super fun and we don't even talk about cannibalism very much at all. And until next time, stay spooky, friends.